we're going to go to our slide here. 8-bit, 8-bit. Time for 8-bit. Alrighty, so we have the same 7 questions that we ask our guest each show, and then we have a 8th bonus question that we'll ask you. So let's dive right in. Anna, what is your earliest memory of tech?
So for me, it actually goes back to when I was like around 7 years old. Like, this is in Costa Rica. I grew up with like a computer at home. Of course, it was like very limited hours. It was DSL, so there was only certain like times that we can use the internet because we did use our landline a lot. But my parents,
I can hear the sound of
yeah. Insert the cue of the music now. But my parents had gone away for like dinner or something, so I was left at home with my nanny, and I decided to break the rules. Like, apparently I like breaking things since I was young. I should have learned that. But I went onto the computer and like I was decided to open up Microsoft Paint, and I created like this checkerboard of design. And in my head, I'm assuming that I was trying to save it, but instead of saving it, I actually saved it as a desktop background. So my parents came home and they needed the computer to respond to emails, and they were like, "What is this background?" And me being young, naive, I blamed it on my nanny, and it was like, no, she used it. And like looking back at it, I'm just like, what was I thinking? Like thinking that I could get away with that? Like, of course it was me. I'm like the young Rugrat running around the house while you guys were gone. And I want to say that I probably was grounded, and they told me like you can't use a computer until like you clean your room and do your homework, and I still went on.
It's so funny.
Signed name to it, so it's your drawing, and it says Anna on it. And like, who did this? Like,
yeah. I love that it was Microsoft Paint, first of all. That is hilarious. I feel like most folks our age probably had a computer when they were younger, but our parents didn't have computers. So it's always really fun for me to hear stories from other people on, I don't think our parents really knew how much we were on the internet or what we were doing on the internet. I used to go on to this chat room called Habbo Hotel, which was this little like avatar. It's basically early Animal Crossing now that I think of it. And I just think about like, oh gosh, like if and when I have kids, I'm going to know how to monitor the internet. But oh my goodness, our parents had no idea that we were changing the parental controls or anything.
So to me, it was interesting because my parents actually did get smart around like 13, 14 when I was already like getting into web development. And like, I was that student, like I later dropped out of college, but it was very much focused in like building stuff on my free time and not doing my homework. So they learned that, and they actually learned that they can remove my network card in my computer and instead give me a USB stick in order to connect to Wi-Fi. So then it became a privilege to use the Wi-Fi when I get handed the stick. And I mean, in retrospective, I wish I would have gone a little bit over and like just bought an entire other new Wi-Fi stick. I didn't think that far ahead, but it was like always like granted the Wi-Fi stick, like fine, you have permission now to go on the internet and like talk to your friends, like look up music and whatever else they did. But I agree, like our parents didn't know what to do, but I'll give credit to my mom for figuring out a way to like lock my internet.
Well, and also there was the issue for those youngins tuning in, maybe some of the Microsoft student ambassadors out there who may be watching this. Back in the day, you either had to have 2 different phone lines to get on the internet, so like a landline and then your internet line, or you just had to like take control of your home line. So only one person could really be on the internet at one time. And I'll tell you something, I still get excited when I hear that dial-up sound. They're like, you got mail. Like it still gives me that dopamine rush that I guess I get now from Twitter when I can log into Twitter. R.I.P. So our next question here is, what is the last piece of tech or hardware that you bought?
So I was actually thinking about this question because I've bought a lot of equipment in order to make like my talks and like working from home a lot more comfortable. But the one that I actually just bought 3 days ago was a new hard drive, like a new solid state hard drive from like SanDisk. My personal laptop is like not working, like to the point that like the computer starts up, I'm able to use Safari, but not Google Chrome. And it's really weird because yes, like it started showing that it was running out of space. I knew the battery keeps on changing. Like, please change me. It's a 2014 Mac. Like, we know that they don't last 6 years.
On its last
so the fact that
legs.
it's still alive, I'm like, I'm gonna try to keep you alive as much as I can. I'll give you as much care. But I had 8 gigabytes left last night, and I can't open anything. Like, I press empty trash, and it actually says you don't have enough space in order to empty the trash. And I'm just this is why my work matters, in order to handle types like this. And Google Chrome can't start up. I can't even turn off Wi-Fi because it uses some form of disk space that my computer does not have. So I'm so stoked for this hard drive to come in order for me to like finally transfer all those things. But I'm also going to try to do that like spring cleanup of all my other hard drives and actually organize my photos. I did photography in a past life, so I have camera equipment and tons of like terabytes of images that I'm like, I think it's time to clean those hard drives out, only keep the stuff that matters. So I'm really, really excited for some of that organization with my new hard drive.
Yeah, digital spring cleaning is definitely something that I need to do and get better at doing more often.
I've never done a spring cleaning for like tech stuff, so this is a start. And then we'll move on to getting rid of USB cables.
I'm just picturing you like holding your laptop in your arms singing "Stay Alive" from Hamilton, just like, please come back alive. Oh my goodness.
The last 2 years with that laptop. I don't want to let you go. Like, I love all the stickers on you. Like, don't leave me.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there should be some way to preserve because these devices become such a part of our like life. They kind of become like another limb in a way. There should be some sort of way that we could like display our previous devices.
So in California, like down in the South Bay, we have the Computer History Museum, which is basically based on that, where like you show all the technology that has been around for years. So it's like if you can eventually have a home that you have a room just for your own personal computer history. Because I remember one of the big things when I was moving out to California, like I had a Google Glass, and in a part of the museum they had this entire space just for Google Glass, and like they were just hanging from the ceiling, and then you'll have like all the history about it. And I always thought that was interesting, but now I'm like, maybe my next, like when part of like my life goals, it's like have a home that has a display for all my tech that has died and can't come back.
My goodness.
That's a cool idea.
I love the idea.
Like a
yeah, like using recycled technology. Like I've seen a lot of cool things with them. Remember, again, aging myself here, back in the day, those AOL CDs. I feel like someone must have a pile of those somewhere, because I know I would take them from Blockbuster every time. And like, I feel like I would buy a chandelier made of those. So if anyone out there, maybe me, I'll make them.
We got to the point at my house that my brother and I collected maybe 50 of them. My brother is also a geek, and like he ended up studying like electrical engineering. So I did get a little bit of like a role model in my family that definitely helped me stay in this space. But it got to the point that we had maybe around 50 discs, and we didn't know what to do with them. So us kind of being kids, even though he's way older than I am, we were literally just putting the disc in our office and like getting another AOL disc and like throwing it at it. So then like all these pieces will like continue breaking. Again, it's breaking things on purpose.
Giant CD-shaped pogs when you think about it, just like throwing the CDs down.
Now I want like little earrings with the little AOL messenger person.
Yeah. Ooh, I have some on today. I have this little, here, I'll take this out. I have this little loading one here. And I've got a little save icon. But I have a pin. I should have worn it. It's the AOL icon, and it says AIM is away, and then it has the years, like, because I think they finally like cut it as of 2000 and maybe it was 2018. That's a little like in memory of.
My favorite one that I usually keep in my desk that I can't find right now is the Bite Me pin, that instead of like Bite Me in the heart is the Bite, like BYTE, is from Sailor HG on Twitter.
Yes, I love all of her stuff. Another great person in tech making really girly, wonderful designs that I sport proudly almost every day. Love Sailor HG's stuff. Okay, quick side question. This is not one of the questions. MSN Messenger or AIM? AIM.
I want to say MSN, but MSN was also a lot larger in Latin America. And the thing too is that if anyone uses Slack, you're familiar with the fact that you have emojis. Well, MSN had just that, where you can just download sticker packs and you would send all these little cute gifts to your friends and you would save them and then you could reuse them. So basically the concept that now we have with a lot of the emojis, like these things were built into MSN. And I mean, for me too, like my parents had like a long distance relationship, like through the entire time that like they were both alive. So Messenger and like Skype and all these technologies like were really a big part of me growing up. Like that's how I stayed in contact with my dad as we were in the US and like he was in Nicaragua. So MSN, like I always like want to try to log into that email just to see if it's still alive out there.
It's always so fun to like see all of the different ways that technology that we used when we were younger has sort of like come into play. Like you mentioned the emojis. I saw someone tweet. So the other day, Brian Douglas, I believe. Yeah, I think it was him, who's a DevRel over at GitHub, posted his new GitHub page thing that everybody gets, like the personal pages. And he designed his to look like a MySpace where he had a top 8.
Yes.
And then yesterday or this morning, I saw a screenshot of a tweet that said something like, we need to bring back top 8 so I can rank my friends against each other again. And I thought, oh, actually, that would be kind of a fun feature to add to some of these social networking platforms.
Well, I think it's you're vouching for people to follow, projects to star.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
I would be
I will add that to mine. All right. Next question I have here is, what technology do you love?
So for me, I think it's been around a lot of the technology has been created to allow us to interact by touching and like using our senses. So I'm not exactly sure what that's called like for technology term, but anything from like the tablets that folks were actually able to like sketch on, to my iPhone, to the apps that enable me to actually drag things from like coloring with my finger to like creating a circle to like mark up my image. Being able to like interact digitally has something that I've always loved. And back in the day, like I actually really wanted to work at a company that had built the kitchen. It wasn't a kitchen table, but like that coffee table that you just drop your phone and then you can like drag your images out of your phone and like show them on there.
Yeah.
So like all this collaboration, touching technology is something that I still hold a love to. And I'm like, in another career path, maybe.
Yeah, like kind of interactive technology kind of stuff. I haven't heard of this table. I'm going to have to look this up. This sounds so cool. So you put you put your phone on the table and then it's able to access your images?
I believe that it did become a product. I want to say it was Adobe that was behind this, Adobe XD Labs. And I remember seeing the prototype of the video where you're actually able to put your phone, and I mean, there's security concerns with just putting your phone in an NFC-enabled computer. I mean, but you would be able to like now physically move the components that are in this phone, which include images and like photos, emojis, maybe, and then display them on your coffee table. So it takes that idea that maybe you grew up in a home that you display things every time you travel, little concerts you went to, but now you're actually able to showcase those in a digital kitchen, like coffee table.
It reminds me of the movie Smart House that was on Disney Channel, where the whole home was like smart and interactive. And I was like, I want to live in that house. And now I realize we kind of do live in that house, I guess, with all the different, hey, whatevers that we call to ask for the temperature and whatnot. I actually had the thought the other day. So I love to use Instagram stories specifically because I feel that it's kind of like arts and craftsy because you get to like draw stuff on images and put text and put little GIFs on it and stuff. And I was thinking the other day, this reminds me so much of this thing that used to be in McDonald's back in the day. I don't know if you guys remember this, but when you physically went into a McDonald's, there would sometimes be these like computer screen things that were like little television screens, and you could color in different things by touching the screen. And I thought it was magic. I was like, this is, because we didn't have touchscreen phones back then. We didn't have any sort of, really any kind of touchscreen at all. And it's so interesting now that I basically have that app on my phone that I get to play with, that I used to play with. And so you played with it too. I'm not crazy, Brandon. Yeah. Yes. It was like a digital, you'd color in like a chicken nugget or like Ronald McDonald on a bicycle, like, and you'd like touch
Ronald
the screen.
And his friends, right.
I actually never got to see it in McDonald's, but that was the last application I downloaded on my phone. I like one of my big things for like self-care is like spending time coloring, whether it's watercoloring or markers. And I couldn't go to sleep, like super anxious, and I ended up like being like, wait, are there coloring apps for my phone? And I found it, and it was great. Like it was so soothing because it gives you the options to just like use like a paintbrush, use a marker, or use like a paint bucket to just like fill in that one space. So you get to be like really creative with the layers of it. And I'm like looking back in retrospective, considering that first early memory of tech question, I'm like, I just really like this art and technology piece. But
and you also mentioned that you played Neopets, correct?
Yes.
We had a guest on recently, Charmaine, who talked all about her Neopets group that she started and how it really helped her with community organization and stuff. Were you also one of those early MySpacers, maybe, who played around with CSS and HTML?
Yeah, so I did the Neopets, and like I actually didn't, I guess, make friends out of Neopets. Like I remember like being obsessed with it, but I want to say that there may have been that language barrier. Like I still wasn't making friends in English on the internet, but I did get that community in MySpace. So I mentioned that I started coding around like 13 years old. So like MySpace was around, and like I found this MySpace templates and like being able to use the skills that like I was picking up on like searching on the internet on like HTML, CSS, and then making my layouts better. And then I actually went ahead and I started making layouts for other folks. And that definitely like started really showing like, hey, I really like this feel. Like, let me continue doing this as like a side hustle that later turned into like a freelance business as I was like super young. But a lot of the people that I became really close with on MySpace, some of them like they're now my Facebook friends, and I've never met them in person. And like, we don't really talk, but we like emoji react to things, and it's just like, oh yeah, that's right, you're that person that I made a MySpace layout to, or like that we met through a fake MySpace layout that a fake MySpace profile that I had to showcase a layout, and then you messaged me about it, asking for the CSS in order to put it on your profile.
Cool.
Oh my gosh, it makes me think of all the blinkies, and I was a live journal girl myself, so I was always making custom things for my live journal. Were you on any of those, Brandon? Did you play any of the like kind of things, social networking platforms that allowed you to do basic HTML?
I didn't. The first one I got on was Facebook back when it was still the Facebook, and you still needed your college email address just to register because it was only for college students, and it was only even at specific colleges. So yeah, I remember in high school when we were all senior year, all of us getting our acceptance letters, that the first thing we would do is go create our Facebook account because it had just come out, I think, that year or the year before. And so you were super cool if you could make a Facebook.
Isn't that crazy to think about now that like babies have Facebooks? Like people make Facebooks for their babies. And back in the day, you had to have a college account. It's like, oh yeah, look at how far we've come.
It's weird. I've like thought about this a lot. Like a lot of my friends are having babies, or people I know, and it's just like I see that they get born and they have an Instagram account, and it's literally photos from newborn up until like they're 2 years old on Instagram. And I'm like, so at what age does your parent hand over that account to you? And then do you hide and delete all the baby photos that are on there?
Right. Well, it's fascinating because I'm finding myself in a situation where I'm trying to digitize all these photos that my parents, oh my God, they spent hundreds of dollars on taking all these physical photos. So I've been scanning them and uploading them to just have less physical clutter. And I think on the one hand, it's kind of great because all of your baby photos exist in the cloud, but then, you know, chaos engineering, got to make sure they're backed up on a hard drive, right? All right. Next question we have here is, what technology do you hate?
So I'll probably get backslash for this, but I hate electric scooters.
Okay. I saw one in a tree.
Like, I think part of it is like being out in California, being out in the Bay Area. Like we have the Silicon Valley culture of electric scooters, and we saw them just thrown all over the Bay Area, and like it being venture capitalists that were using it to go from meeting to meeting on Market Street, and like just being very tech broy about it. And I think that like is what started irritating me, specifically like when I was like working like in downtown, like South of Market area. So it just made me hate them. And then I'm kind of glad that they've gone away. And like I would always like support all the folks that were doing interesting things to the scooters in order to like protest them. But it's also hard because like looking at it, like I grew up in Central America, and like transportation there is not as prominent as we have here in the US. And one of the things is that people are always really crafty. Like they have always done delivery of medicines, deliveries of meals to your home from like medicines, and all of that was always driven by like little electric scooters. Maybe not the same like that you have to be standing, but like these would come with a little seat. So it's hard to actually say like I hate electric scooters when I know like the communities that I got like born into and like still like hold love to are like actually moving forward by having technologies like it.
I saw an electric scooter in a tree yesterday, and I went, oh, nature is healing. I remember when we were younger and Razor scooters came out, and I was like, this is my jam. I'm going to take my Razor scooter everywhere. I think we need to bring Razor scooters back, personally.
And I think that's what it comes about. Like, you need to do some physicalness in order for them to move versus just put on wireless headphones and, like, go on the sidewalk and really piss off people.
Quick shout out to
supposed to be on the sidewalk.
That's true. They're not supposed to be there.
Somebody actually yelled at me the other day. I was walking down the sidewalk, and there's a scooter coming, and he like asked me to move out of the way. I was like, no, man. Pedestrians use the sidewalk. You're supposed to use that scooter on the road, and you're not even wearing a helmet. Like, you're not even trying to follow the rules.
Mm-mm. Well, I'll do a quick shout out to I think it's still an Instagram account, Bros on Birds. It was an account that I used to follow. But I'm 50-50 on the scooters. I don't see nearly as much of them now that I live in Oakland. But having sat next to someone on a plane in the last year who told me that she lost her 2 front teeth on a scooter and she was wearing a helmet, I think I'll be staying off of them for a little bit. All right, next question. What other profession would you want to attempt?
So I think for me is politics. Like I've always been driven by community. I've like hold like another personal value around like be the change that you want to see in the world. Very cliche, I know. But a lot of it like part of like the activism that I've done like throughout the last years and like in the mental health space and like diversity, equity, inclusion space has been driven by that. So I always kind of like held it in the back of my head. Like eventually if I ever want to leave tech, and politics kind of seems like a space that I would really, really want to. And then to that, there's like all these other layers to it where like I will love to go back to Costa Rica and get involved in like local politics. But there's also this like really ambitious career goal that I would love to try to like run to become president of Costa Rica. Because like being born there, like that's one of the rights that I do have. And I was like, okay, like it randomly came up on like one night that I was like, what ambitious career goal like seems really high reach, but maybe if I like set up myself for success 6 years before that, maybe it can be done. I was like, politics? Maybe when I was in community college, I wanted to do like major in computer science and get a minor in political science. Advisors were like, Anna, those two campuses like just don't mix. Like wherever you're gonna have a rough time, don't do it. I later decided to just stick to computer science, but then I dropped out. So clearly that wouldn't have worked out whatsoever. But it's just this idea that I think eventually getting more involved in like local politics would be really cool. And going back to like the country that I'm from that has a lot of cool things from like not having military, having a woman president, having people of color is something that I would enjoy. But I do also understand that's like I've been in the US for so long that it's kind of hard to think about like leaving and like going back there and starting to get involved in a space that people have been doing that for like 30, 40 years. And like, those are the ones that are going to be running for presidency. So it seems really ambitious, but I still keep it on like my to-do list, goal list that I do have.
Well, I would vote for you. Also, I think we need more representation in politics of people who actually know how technology works and how to use it. So it always makes me very excited when I find out that technical, but also like ethical people want to pursue politics, because I think that there are a lot of unknowns in this industry, as we saw from the recent court questioning from Mark Zuckerberg, from people who simply didn't sound like they knew how the internet worked. So hopefully in this new era with young people, and I know we have a lot of students who come in through the Microsoft internship program and through the MSA program. I hope some of them end up running for office someday, because we need more people up top who know about the technology that's supporting them.
And I think you that good point of like having those conversations around ethics, around technology, like the way it's been created, who it's been created by, and who is it for, and the changes that it actually brings, and like how is it that we're going as a society with that.
Yeah, especially with AI. We had Charmaine on a couple weeks ago, who works with AI for Good. And gosh, now that I'm starting to dive into artificial intelligence and machine learning stuff, I'm like, please, everyone, come and work on it. We need more voices in the room.
And on that note, like, but part of like what I've mentioned too is like passions of being like representation, like in the AI and machine learning space. Like we really need those like Black and Latinx folks to be on there, because the ways that a lot of that AI has been created, like, really discriminates against people of color.
Yeah. Ooh, and I have to ask, have you seen there's a TikTok going around from this developer named Ray, and she has trained a machine learning model with pictures of drag queens. And she shows the visual representation of what a computer thinks a drag queen is. I'll send it to you. I'll also put it in the show notes. It's like watching art, because they've basically trained this model with all images of drag queens, and it's just like, I shared it with April, Vogue and Code on Twitter, and we're both like, can we have some of these as art in our home? They're beautiful.
That sounds actually really amazing, because it is like that edge case, like that technology was not created to identify things like that, but how does it get handled?
Yeah, it's made me really excited as I've started kind of my journey into learning AI and ML, because it feels like so far most of the examples and demos and use cases for it have been really practical. But knowing me, I'm doing weird things with weird creative stuff. All right. What profession would you not want to attempt?
I think for me, it's like anything in the medical field. Like when I was young, I actually wanted to be a firefighter, which to me ends up being funny, considering I work in infrastructure site reliability that has to do firefighting, helping
simulated firefighting.
Yeah, so it's like I did become a firefighter in some other ways, but I think the medical field is just one that, like, the amount of education that you need to get in order to completely understand like bodies, whether it's the brains or like you specifying like hearts, that is a lot. And like having to worry about the life like right in front of you, and like that is just something I can't like think about, bear, or like be willing to comprehend the amount of work that goes into. And like I know that for a lot of folks that like studied medicine, like work in the medical field, that's how they feel about coding or things like that. So I also get it's like just driven, like is based on the personality and what you kind of like want to do. But even like now with current times, like with COVID, like the folks that are out and like the frontline responders that are like tackling, like making sure that we're all trying to stay safe and like flattening the curve on this, like that's not a job or stress that like I would bear on anyone.
Well, Brandon's in the same boat because he doesn't like blood. he will faint if he sees blood.
I just pass out.
Well, it's interesting because I was actually on a call this morning for a panel with the Microsoft MVPs. That was a Tech Got Talent panel with April and a couple other folks here at Microsoft talking about our creative endeavors outside of tech. And something that I like to mention to a lot of folks that I've seen as far as a difference between the performing arts or even just the arts in general and working in tech is if you're an actress, you can audition a bunch and be the best at your craft. But if there's so many factors that are out of your control. Maybe you don't fit the costume. There's all these different things. But what I love is in theater, you work really hard and you become the best dancer you can be or the best singer you can be. But in tech, there's so many, like today I'm doing AI ML. A couple years from now, I could be doing VR or, a completely different field. So I always kind of make that comparison to like, oh, if you're a doctor, you study a specific thing. But what technology has really opened up my world to is like, oh, I don't have to like have a specific, kind of expertise in this. I can do an expertise for a little bit and then move on to a completely different thing. So it sounds, based on what we've talked about today, you have a lot of different hands in different projects. So that makes sense. Very cool. Next question we have here is, what technology do you wish existed from film or TV?
So for me, is the Jetsons flying cars. Like, looking back at like the cartoons that I watched, the Jetsons and like Rocket Power and like Rugrats or stuff that like are really vivid for me. But the Jetsons flying cars to me was also just interesting because like I always saw them. I was like, this is never gonna happen. And then of course, like when I start working at Uber and like that mission was very much like make transportation reliable. There was actually a division that was working on this, and it was just like the fact that I'm technically pretty close to folks that are trying to make Jetsons flying cars reality was just bizarre to think, like where I was as a kid and being like, whoa, amazed. But now, of course, it's like, it's really concerning. Like the idea of it is amazing, but it stays for me in theory, like this would be cool. The amount of issues that we have already with cars on the road, like I can't imagine what that's going to look like if they're over our heads, and regulations and like borders and like city guidelines, state guidelines, national, like can your flying car go overseas? Like now you have planes. Like it's
I can
like
hear the sound in my head of the Jetsons car, like yeah, Jetsons, I feel like there's even one that I used to have as my cover photo on Twitter for a while of the, it's like the makeup machine that the mom puts on. I always say this is me before a conference, or I'm just like putting on my face.
I feel that.
And I think a lot of people stuck at home during shelter in place need that dog walking treadmill that he has outside the apartment at the beginning of the Jetsons. Also, I would just really like to have a robot butler, to be perfectly honest. It'd be pretty cool.
That was another one. I feel like I need to sit down and start rewatching like Jetsons now that like I'm in shelter in place. It's like I have all the free time. What's my excuse for not watching the Jetsons?
Yeah, and I bet some of the technology in the Jetsons probably exists now. Like I always refer to, I was obsessed with Xenon Girl of the 21st Century, and when I was in elementary school, all I wanted was video chat. Look at my job now. I video chat all day. So be careful what you wish for, I guess. Wait, what were it? Was Elroy, Jane. I'm trying to think of Judy Jetson.
How do you remember?
His boy Elroy,
Astro,
Jane, his wife Asteroid. Astro. I can't think of the other names.
Astro.
Such a fun show. I love to see interpretations of the future done from the past, like all of the previous Tomorrowlands at Disney and like all the ways that we've sort of envisioned, like this is what the future is going to be. And
nope.
Still no flying cars. So close. I also just love the design of them on the, I feel like if you're watching Upload, they have kind of these hover flying car things. They look a little modern to me. I'm like, I want the bubble, the full Jetson experience.
Very on board with that too.
Yes. All right. We have gotten to our final bonus question, and this is actually one that I thought of when you were talking earlier about the talk that you gave in Spanish. And I would love to know: do you have any mantras or catchphrases in Spanish that are very special to you, or that you kind of repeat to yourself, or maybe like to use very often?
It's weird because like 50% of my internal monologues in Spanish and another 50% is in English. So I like count and do a lot of like math and science work in Spanish. Ooh. But when it like comes to like talking to myself, like problem solving, a lot of it actually goes on English. But I think like when things like get really stressful, like I feel like highly anxious, like telling myself like todo va a estar bien, everything will be okay. Like in Spanish is a little bit more soothing. Like I don't know if it's like in my brain goes more into like a parental figure trying to like kind of like caress you and like make it a little bit better, like growing up in a Spanish home. So I wonder if that's a little bit tied to it, but it's very much of like it has to escalate to a point that like it's freak out moment and I'm like, all right, that's right. I can try Spanish words on me. Maybe these actually are going to stick. And then, of course, like being from Costa Rica, like pura vida, like pure life. It's about like happiness and like just enjoying life, even when you fail, even when things don't go right. Like you only have one life. You have to live it up. So I think that's like one of the things that like I'm proud Costa Rica and like Nicaraguan and like that part of it. Like live life, be friendly.
That's so interesting to me that you do math in Spanish, because you probably learned math early on in Spanish. Yeah. So I'm in awe. I'm like, I can barely do math in English, Anna.
all the counting. So if it's like cash transactions and stuff, it's like uno, dos, or like 48 menos 20. Like it's easier for me to just process that in Spanish. It's interesting. But I do think it's like you say, it's because I learned the word, like the math, subtractions, and like multiplication in Spanish, my brain goes there first.
I think it's really interesting, especially when we learn these foundational things that we end up using like a bunch in our adulthood. Like I learned all of my numbers from a computer game that was in black and white and had little dice in it. So when I picture numbers, I picture them like as the dice, like 1 through 10. Do you have anything like that, Brandon? Like from like colors, or I mean, for me, it wouldn't have been colors from a computer because ours was black and white, but.
I mean, I definitely have associations in a similar way because I played a lot of educational computer games growing up. That was kind of a compromise.
Leapfrog?
Oh yeah, definitely. and yeah, that was kind of the compromise. Was my parents would let me play these games on the computer as long as they were, using my brain and not, I guess, rotting my brain would be the opposite. And so yeah, there's a lot of things that like basic physics stuff that I learned about through these games that, yeah, when I hear it, I always think back to like there was one where you had to find parts and build a plane. So you would like solve these math problems. And if you got it correct or solved it in a certain amount of time, then you got to choose from this list of parts. And you're building a plane as a 6-year-old, but they're introducing concepts like lift and drag and teaching you things like that. And yeah, so when I think about certain concepts, I definitely associate them to those games growing up, because yeah, that's where I learned about it. It's like, oh yeah, I know all about lift. I used that when I was building a plane when I was 6.
I know fun facts about Costa Rica because of Carmen Sandiego.
Yes, very much in for that.
All of my geography tips, all from Carmen Sandiego, which has been really interesting now in adulthood that I'm a little bit more well-traveled. I'll travel internationally and be like, oh yeah, they're known here for this specific dish. And it's like, how do you know? Carmen Sandiego.
It's like young me actually thought that I should learn this. But what I was going to say is like, we're talking about like those educational programs, like the building blocks of coding. I think is like one of the coolest things also like out there nowadays for like younger generations to try to figure out how tech works, like being able to drag those functions and like if statements and like use it. Like I believe Microsoft has a platform for that. I think I ran an event with them at some point around it.
Yeah, there's some really cool, I'm so jealous. I wish I could like time machine forward and be a kid now, because all this technology is so cool. Also, imagine having an iPad when you're younger. That would have been so cool.
I still don't have an iPad.
So from 92 and Pike, I'm Chloe.
And I'm Brandon.
And good night, good morning, good afternoon, buenas tardes, buenos dias, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Nailed it. Dance it out.
Exit music. Yeah. Y'all didn't know I was a songwriter. Great. Thank you so much.